Welcome to the daily live omission. And because people think and say what they see and hear, we're here to share with you what 300 mainstream media executives don't want you to know. This report is on the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, the cradle of America's revolution in 1776. Coming in, I knew Philly was going to be a lot different than Cleveland. I just didn't know how. Turned out that 240 years later, 2016, Philadelphia is to be the site of not just one national convention, but two conventions, one of which was about to crash and burn into the flames on Wednesday night, the 27th, whose reality has still never been reported by the MSM. The other, a convention that was moving from infancy into adolescence. By the time I left, it was trying to strike out into adulthood and make a difference. It's the tale of two conventions. The DNC on the east side of South Broad Street and the other, a Bernie-driven alter ego, if you will, that was held just across the street. The DNC convention had as many as 10,000 people attend over the course of a week at the Wells Fargo Center where the Flyers play. The other convention was held all over Philadelphia and it attended by over 50,000 people. It was centered in FDR Park on the west side of Broad Street across from Wells Fargo. It also had a large stage, but it was outdoors. It featured 3 jumbotrons. Separating the two were 2 rows of steel riot fence backed by Philadelphia's finest. The key players were Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman, Bernie Sanders, and Billy Taylor. You're probably wondering who Billy Taylor is, and we'll get to Billy soon, but let's review the developing train wreck that greeted everyone as they arrived on Philly on Saturday the 24th. Everyone knew the DNC was cheating Bernie, especially all of his supporters. When WikiLeaks released the hacked DNC emails on Sunday, it became not only official, it rubbed its dirt in the face of Bernie's people and transformed a disgruntled constituency into a militant one. Bernie had won their vote and the election, but it was stolen, and stolen boldly. Here was the proof. And Bernie's people, all used to having the Clinton kumbaya shoved down their throat, were in open revolt. And John Kennedy said that those that make a peaceful revolution impossible make a violent revolution inevitable. And the sword the DNC thought they were sticking in Bernie is the same sword that has been turned upon the DNC. You watch the Daily Live omission before you know that history defines a revolution as a governmental bankruptcy of the people. And these Americans that had voted for Bernie did it for the same reason other Americans voted for Trump. America is in revolt. A peaceful revolt now, but if that changes, it is our ruling elite that must be held responsible. Make no mistake, America is in the first stage of a revolution as the social contract between the government and the people has been rent and torn by the avarice and greed of our ruling elite. Americans no longer trust their government, as you can see from this chart, and for good reason. What do you think happens when this chart gets to 0? It's not a tough economy, it's a rigged economy, just like it's a rigged government, and it's getting worse every day. Now 50,000 men and women, Bernie's people, have been forced to build a new organization to transfer their outrage into a new and constructive direction. Maybe a new party, but I think something greater than that. Something to appeal to the entire nation, to every American so as to make every American free. And through our shared freedom, equality. Billy Taylor is a landscaper, or at least he used to be. But Billy is really what he's always been, an activist, for lack of a better word, a patriot by another, yet undeniably risen out of the ranks of the American people to help lead America across our Rubicon. Billy is the guy with the vision that filled out the permits last winter to protest all over Philadelphia during the DNC convention. By May, his actions had created an organization of talented, like-minded people that had the courage to say no to the tyrannical state that had taken over the Democratic Party. And now they have a tiger by the tail. But let Billy Taylor tell his story here in this interview when I was able to steal a few moments with him before his phone started ringing again. It was Wednesday, July 27, 2016, the day the Democratic Party died. All right, I'm here with Billy, who's running the main stage at FDR Park during the Democratic Convention. And Well, Billy, why don't you just tell me what you're doing and what's up here, and just give me some background, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay, my name is Billy Taylor. I'm the executive director of Philly.fyi. This is our main stage. We actually have a second stage in the back as well for overflow. Um, and what we're doing is we're trying to dedicate and help towards a political revolution in any way we possibly can to harness an energy that we're afraid that may die.
My sound rig was being hit with microwave interference during our interview, so I'll have to fill in the conversation where the sound fails. Billy was born an activist. The same systemic failure that was taking America down had seriously affected his life and family. So he had answered the call of his country. And along with it, with so many people that were now depending upon him, Billy had taken hold of the reins and become its leader. This is to the best of my recollection in my words, as I don't want to put words in Billy's mouth, but this is the truth, and Billy wears it well. What Philly.fyi had accomplished in a short time was more than impressive. There were people here in the park from not only all around the United States, but internationally as well. When I say wow in this recording, it's because Billy explained to me how they had put the entire stage together in 4 days after, as Billy put it, a gift from God landed in their lap to pay for it. I think one of the best observations was that politics is a bit like poker. You had to play the hand and be able to change from day to day as circumstance and opportunity appeared. We then closed out the interview on Jill Stein, as now that Bernie was out, Jill is the go-to candidate.
Weeks ago,
You're kidding.
this minute, meaning we were planning on one thing, and then it's like we just had a gift from God. Go boom.
It's hard for anyone to avoid. You're exactly right. Once people are educated, once they have that knowledge, you cannot take it away from them.
Yeah.
Where do you guys look? How do you look to go forward with this information now?
Well, right now, since it's the election time, I think it's really you got to play it day by day, especially with Sanders. To give you an example, when Sanders endorsed Hillary, that there goes a curveball. Literally, your plans can change overnight. That's politics.
Yeah.
You literally have to be ready to shift gears at any given time. I find this kind of like it's almost like playing poker. You got to play the hand you're dealt the best you can, and at any given.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the interview. And I noticed you have Jill Stein up here later.
I believe Jill Stein, we're trying to find a way in because right now they have the exits blocked off and she has a really strict schedule today. So we're trying to find a way to get a vehicle into the park, which is no vehicles allowed. So we do have her on schedule. We're having a schedule on conflict, I guess. She's due somewhere at 7 o'clock. So we don't know if we're going to be able to accommodate her by then, just because of the restrictions we have on this park.
It seems like Jill Stein is kind of like the go-to candidate for a lot of Bernie's people.
She's she's set herself up into a number of ways to do that. And it's actually beautiful, I think, because one, she supports Bernie. She's called out, Bernie, we want you. Her platform's almost identical to Bernie's. If you believe in Bernie, you'll believe in Jill. And if you believe in the issues that he fought for and so on, you'll believe in the same issues Jill's fighting for. Let's keep in mind the only reason Bernie had the name recognition he did this time, and they even tried to black his name out in the mainstream media. The only reason he had the name recognition he did is because he ran on a Democratic ticket. If he was to run as an independent, he wouldn't be recognized or have the name that he does now.
Ron Paul found the same thing out when he ran as a libertarian.
Right, but here goes the thing. Like, when that happens, here we have good seeds that are being overlooked just because mainstream media and it's honestly my goal was to have a Gary Johnson and Jill Stein debate. You can't say screw you to the establishment than to have your own debates. And to be honest, this is where my mind is. How can I set this up in the next 4 years?
I arrived in Pottstown, Pennsylvania on Sunday, about 45 minutes from downtown Philadelphia in the afternoon, unpacked and headed out. By the time I navigated the downtown traffic and figured out that everyone who was at FDR Park, the crowd or what was left of them, was leaving. I met with a few people and walked along with them and a young man named Raphael. And to an individual, what I heard was the same. I'm voting for Jill Stein. I will not vote for that neocon warhawk, Hillary Clinton. Even if she told me what I wanted to hear, I know she'd be lying to me. She's a liar. I was amazed. I had no idea. I'd heard of the WikiLeaks, but I didn't know how it had affected everyone. It was electric, and its theme ran through the people like lightning, created a spontaneous convention of the people. My horseback poll would indicate that Stein will get at least 80% of the Bernie vote. Clinton 15, with Trump and Mickey Mouse dividing the rest. Gary Johnson was a non-event in Philly, but then Gary Johnson's a non-event. He's a libertarian who's not even a libertarian. I never heard his name mentioned. What I did hear was the website Philly.fyi, and the first night, as I would discover, it was one of the best things that happened to me during this expedition because I was about to experience the worst of the trip. I spent the next 24 hours hovering in pain between a full sweat fever and ice-cold chills like I never had before. The next 24 hours I spent in recovery, but it worked in my favor as I had little to do except study the Philly.fyi website. Here was the entire week of events for every group, every parade, every moment of the main stage, every affiliated group and their contacts, their Facebook, their websites. It was a smorgasbord of social and progressive activists and flooded my senses with the altruistic thrills of my youth. Now, I'm not sure it wouldn't have been easier to have dived into the Hunter Thompson School of Journalism. Incapacitated on drugs would have been a welcome relief, but I didn't have a sidekick like Dr. Gonzo. All I had was a bag of grapes I had picked up at Walmart the night before, but they were cool and kept me hydrated, and if you ask me, they kept me alive. It occurred to me while I was recovering Tuesday as I scanned Philly.fyi that if I hadn't been so strung out, I would have been on the streets and I would have missed understanding the developing organization of Philly.fyi. I would have missed it just like everyone else. Before the sun set on Tuesday, I had an interview set up with Billy Taylor. Wednesday was going to be my day. Here's just part of what Philly.fyi and some of the key organizations. The main one you want to pay attention to is Brand New Congress that proposes one campaign to elect 535 new members of Congress. Sound familiar? Listening to Billy's interview, I kept going back to politics being like poker. You have to play the hand that's dealt you. Yeah, we don't choose a president. We haven't for years. We're given a selection, an illusion that we choose our president and live in the land of the free. Sure, we're brave, but more like stupid. The real power in our Constitution is vested in the Congress, but their powers have all been given to the executive branch. The president has created an imperial presidency. And no one likes Congress. Why should we? They don't do their job because they're busy begging for money so they can keep their high-paying job with all the perks. For 30 pieces of silver, they'll roll over and perform as command. Maybe we should start thinking more about replacing Congress than trying to live an illusion. That's what Brand New Congress is looking to do, but not until 2018. They still don't have a hook, a theme, a simple litmus test most every American supports. Yeah, the truth is you can't win with 25% of the vote. In Philadelphia in 1776, they didn't coronate a new king. They created a new Congress. Well, why don't we do the same thing? And why wait? We don't need candidates. We just need the candidates' hearts and minds. We just need a litmus test that appeals to every American that can apply to every member of Congress. And I suggest the 4 bills before Congress today that I call liberty legislation. Pass these 4 bills today and we can have America back tomorrow. Do you know what the problem is in America today? The agencies of the executive branch create 90% of our laws today. It's shown on this chart of how laws are sold in America today. Brexit passed in England because Brussels was writing 55% of England's laws. What's wrong with we Americans? This is the process that creates most of the laws we live under, and it's all for sale. It's here lobbyists buy the laws they want, and any laws a lobbyist doesn't like sends to the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, the clearinghouse for all laws Congress doesn't write. This is what created the imperial presidency and wields the powers of the people, because the people's place in our government is the Congress. But it doesn't have any of its powers anymore, and so neither do we. Sure, lobbyists bribe Congress, but the real money is reserved for the president, because he controls 90% of our laws through the OIRA. This is why it costs so much to run for president. A couple $1 billion is the cumulative payoff threshold. Most of the money goes to the DNC or RNC, depending on who occupies the White House. Now, that's what's at stake. That's what rules America. So why not take Congress back? Forget the president. If we take Congress, we can strip the president of our powers because Congress is the people's place in our government. That's why they've stolen over all of our powers over the years. Now we want it back. You want to win the revolution that's been forced down our throats? Then take back Congress and end the grip on power, not only Uber banking Wall Street and its corporocracy, but the military-industrial machine and the endless wars of our ruling neocon warhogs. Things are a bit up in the air, as you can imagine right now after the convention, but the good news is in a recent conversation with Billy, Philly.fyi is looking at how they can open themselves up in order to include all Americans. It's clearly a move in the right direction because this is a movement that involves all Americans. And the one thing we can all agree upon is that the system has got to change. That's what liberty legislation is all about. Or we could just vote everyone out of Congress in November like Sean Burke Reset Our Government says. Not a bad idea. The only problem is that while everyone hates Congress, they love their congressperson. Because the government is so involved in our lives, your congressperson has done something for you, or a friend, or a family member at some point, so it's usually a case of not in my backyard. Now, give it some thought while we go back to the funeral in Philly.fyi. I arrived at Oregon and I-95 in South Philly about 2 p.m. on Wednesday. Amid all the heat earlier in the week, I welcomed Wednesday as just another typical warm summer day, so I was still feeling the effects of a fever. Oregon I-95 was the line in the sand dividing South Philly from both conventions, and from here you had to walk. So you parked and walked, but not bad, maybe 8 blocks down the Broad Street. Down at the end is the main entrance to the sports complex on the left. In this complex, east of Broad, was the Wells Fargo Center. Behind it are the Phillies and Eagles stadiums, one north, the other south. Across the street on one corner is the fashionably iron-barreled and concrete-columned Eagles training facility. On the south corner, on the right, is FDR Park, and in the park was the stage, or convention center, if you will, with 3 jumbotrons, sound, and professional mixing and camera booth 100 feet out in front and center. Yet remember, they didn't actually start throwing this thing together until sometime in May. My first stop down Broad Street was in front of a CVS inside the zone, and this interview is with the first person I met. It would lead to one of the most extraordinary interviews I will ever conduct, but let's let this lady tell her story. It starts with Tuesday and covers the parade, the SWAT teams, and what the DNC did to its Bernie delegates that walked out. On Tuesday evening, that brought me right up to date.
One of the delegates on the street last night said, "We've known that you people have been out here. We've known it, but we haven't seen you. This is the first I've seen it when I came out in the street tonight because they've been bussing us around the back and bringing us in that way so we don't see the protesters." And what else did you want me to tell you about?
Were you a delegate?
No.
Okay.
No,
I
but
know a delegate.
I've met a few.
Okay.
I rode on the train with a couple.
My rig was already failing me, and I didn't know it. But she was telling me how on Tuesday, when the delegates walked out, they were herded into a tent so they couldn't get to the crowd outside the fence and left there. A number of times the police tried to lure the crowd away, but no one took the bait. There were SWAT teams and armored cars everywhere, but that was because Black Lives Matter was in the crowd, having marched down Broad Street early in the day. Finally, it got late, and the hot sun of the day had worn every down like chalk on pavement, and the crowd dispersed. Only then were the delegates released into the night after everyone else was gone. I missed it, but now I was on a roll because my next interview was with the really good guy Keith McHenry, author, vegan, peacenik, and co-founder of Food Not Bombs. You won't want to miss this interview with Keith as he explains how he's tortured and hung from the ceiling of the San Francisco Police Department for 3 days for feeding people during the 50-year celebration of the United Nations. It's a long interview, so I'll have to broadcast it separately with Sean Burke. You won't want to miss this interview with Keith McHenry. Getting back, Wednesday was like a Spielberg movie, starting out with a bang, then falling back into a routine that builds into a dramatic conclusion. Down at FD Park, I visited the occupied camp and inquired if there was anyone from Chicago OWS. Kind of expected to see Seth and a few of the diehards, but no. No Chicago contingent. And they wandered around a bit, getting some footage of what was being called the Walk of Shame, the name given to the walkway on the other side of the fence that some of the delegates took to the DNC convention. Lining the fence were mainly Bernie people, lobbying the entering delegates. There were plenty of police, on foot, bikes, helicopters, and in Philadelphia, on motorcycles. Philly is a lot larger than Cleveland. They had enough of their own kind that outside help wasn't necessary. In fact, I kind of liked Philly, and I wouldn't mind going back to visit. I then wandered down to the main stage, interacting with whoever I met, and it was there that I met Billy Taylor and watched Keith give a speech. He was followed by a rapper who was drawing the crowd's awareness to the corrupt convention going on at the Fargo Center, and specifically mentioned Bilderbergs, Rockefellers, Rothschilds all in the same breath. It kind of surprised me because of the awareness. People seem to be more aware. Yeah, but awareness is an endless battle. Just when you think you're aware of what's going on, someone explains a deeper truth. And the human mind sometimes has a hard time reaching around that reality. Even when it's forefront in their minds, the habits and perceptions that have been ingrained with are not easily overcome. And too often one finds themselves slipping back into the comfortable paradigm they think they've been living in. And they fall back into the old habits, the old perceptions. I can think of no finer example than a revolution. A lot of people at Philly.fyi conventions support their revolution or that revolution, but they have a hard time accepting we are in a real shooting revolution, that it's going to get a lot worse. They don't see that revolution. Even if they do, they don't see how it's going to change their lives. But it will. So they go back to the revolution they created in their minds, be it social or moral, while in reality they're waiting to be swept aside by a rising tsunami. They just can't see it because it's not on their dumb phone, so it doesn't exist. But that will change as reality sweeps them up like so many dust bunnies under the couch. A Dusk movie was shown on the Jumbotron, what I would categorize as propaganda about voting laws, rights, and wrongs. It was professionally done in a satirical style that continued the illusion that there really a difference between a Democrat and a Republican, when in reality both adhere to supporting the same tyrannical government that had just screwed Bernie Sanders and his followers into the ground sideways. See, all these people were holding a counter-revolution they were unaware of, but that's why they were there. And the entire government that had screwed their candidate was up on the screen telling that part of it was all right, while blurring the line of distinction between right, wrong, and reality. That's what every tyrant needs, a Jew, a patsy, a fall guy, a diversion to blame it on. They would have been better served to show Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. At least at the end of the movie, they joined hands to fight the real enemy, the Nazis. I mean, who do you think is running this government today? Our government is run by neocons. What do you think a neocon is? A new conservative? No, they're the new Nazis. They're no different than the old Nazis. They're just disguised in new sheep clothing so they can walk amongst the sheep without causing too much alarm. The reality is it's easier to vote in America to buy cough medicine at Walmart. And those states that require an ID are being swept aside by the courts, who say it's so important that people must be allowed to vote that it's okay to sometimes let people who aren't American citizens the same rights and privileges, even if they aren't an American citizen. The reality is, if it were so important, and it is, we would all be more circumspect on making sure each voter was a citizen, a shareholder in America. It's one of those rare things in life that is not only a right, but a duty and a privilege. Like I said, Casablanca would have been a better choice. They were even serving popcorn. It was after the movie that the stage regained its focus and held a funeral for the passing of the DNC. It was a defining moment, a solemn moment, befitting its end. The casket was then carried off the stage and out of the park and lifted defiantly against the black security fence at the main entrance to the sports complex, behind which stood the Fargo Center. It was the most dramatic scene I'll ever witness, a pivotal point in time, a milestone, a Rubicon that was crossed. It was also the time when my rented $5,000 camera sound package decided to stop recording without letting me know. Here's some footage of the funeral and march to the gate I was able to lift from the Philly.fyi Facebook site with their permission. I've been trying to find someone who was shooting film outside the park like I was, going as far as to advertise on Craigslist, and I'm not the only one. So I know Philly.fyi was appealing to everyone to supply those lost shots on their Facebook page. Hopefully, we'll find them together. In the aftermath, I interviewed a number of people. Here are 2 Bernie delegates from St. Louis, but by then the sound was failing too. So I'll recount that one declared for Hillary because he's concerned about Supreme Court nominees. The lady hadn't lost sight of the bigger picture and was going to vote for Jill Stein. The objective is to get her 5% of the vote and attain federal financing for the creation of the Green Party, an objective now shared by so many others who gathered in Philadelphia this week. But every one of them has pledged themselves to going home to continue the work of a revolution that they can feel but don't understand. And it's up to the leaders of Philly.fyi to give them the tools and the clarity they need. Make no mistake, these are the millennials that are going to shape our world because it's their world. I just hope they don't get fooled again. You know, people might think this campaign is over the way a reactionary Trump keeps falling on a sword, but I think the insanity has just begun. How else can a dead gorilla, a cartoon mouse, and a meteorite keep threatening to outpoll the two mainstream candidates? Needs to say that these two mainstream candidates will still be the candidates come November. So election day is 100 days out, and I think our world is in for a wild ride between now and then. I think the wildest card out there is the world economy. From what I can see, 2016 is shaping up to be a mirror of 2008. Whereas we had Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers to lead into the occupying illusion of the Republican and Democrat conventions. 2016, we had the revolution of Brexit. Before that, a sputtering China, one of the last imaginary growth engines left in a world of illusions. Immediately after the conventions, when the world is enjoying its annual August sabbatical, the wheels are coming out the world's equity markets, just like in 2008. Oil is heading down hard, led by a head and shoulders formation that reads $24 a barrel, a retest of its recent in 2008 lows. Whereas in 2008 there were only 75 trillion derivatives worldwide, today derivatives are somewhere north of $500 billion. How do you like that for a lead into an exponentially growing disaster? The Olympics in Rio is a plane train crash in slow motion, and black swans are everywhere. The only question is which one will trigger a financial avalanche. My money is on Italian banks that will slide and take out first Deutsche Bank, and then London as the world swallows up the bursting bubbles created by the world's central bank's Keynesian experiments in hopeless fiscal insanity that spreads across the globe like a big rock thrown into a small pool of water. It's not that all different than the world depression of the 1930s that started in Western Europe and spread out from there. You know, Mark Twain was right when he said politicians were like diapers and need to be changed frequently for the same reason. But he's dead wrong when he said that history doesn't exactly repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Because history does repeat itself. The entire world is entering an age of revolution, forming a much sharper reality with each passing day. So where does this leave Philly.fyi? Because it carries an unimaginable burden, because it is the current organization with the greatest chance of success of completing a revolution in America before the serious shooting starts. I spoke to Billy Taylor earlier in the week, and he said that they would soon meet to figure out how to expand the movement so they could serve all Americans, rich and poor, conservative and liberal, equal and not, and I wholeheartedly agree. To do otherwise would only serve to isolate what could be a key component in the revolution that would do no one any good. I can guarantee that the main thing, really the only thing, is that we terminate America's current ruling form of government and replace it with a government over which the people rule. Unless America does this, no changes will take place, and America will remain divided and then thrown into an escalating, endless war that we can never win. America will be left to fight over the same problems we have today, only more so, because at the same time, our resources will be shrinking every day. 4 bills that make up liberty legislation that are before Congress today, and which, if enacted, would achieve the revolution we all seek overnight. In an instant, America would become a government where the daily operating model of both government and finance would become a highly organized but decentralized government, and would place the rule of the government over the people with the rule of the people over that government. This is the only thing that will end the threat of an escalating revolution that will otherwise engulf all of America and the world. So I close this episode of the Daily Live Mission on this solemn note, having done all one American can do in handling it on to what I believe is America's best hope for peace and the restoration of our future. I hope everyone will join together in their thoughts and prayers as America enters its darkest hours. This concludes this episode of the Daily Live Mission. If you want to help restore the rule of law in America and make America great again, I invite you to take a look at www.scienceofliberty.us and read Liberty Legislation, a simple litmus test comprising 4 bills before Congress today, and the term limits that, if passed, would change overnight the entire daily operating model of both government and finance in America today back to the rule of the people and a state of liberty. The single strategy of liberty legislation is one campaign to elect 535 candidates to Congress by electrifying 165 million registered voters to take back America and elect a new Congress using liberties legislation to provide the necessary litmus test to anyone that wants our vote. It is open to any party, any color, any gender. We don't need candidates. We need the candidates' hearts and minds. And they will give it freely, else we will vote for someone who will, in their place, in Congress. If we elect a new Congress that will pass all 4 bills, get going on term limits, we will usher in a state of liberty, and with it, an era of bounty and justice for all. Liberty is what made America great in the first place, and it is the only true and logical way to make America great again. If you'd like to help, make a donation or buy a copy of The Science of Liberty, American Reformation at scienceofliberty.us. Please do. Here you'll find liberty legislation. You can read both liberty legislation and the first 42 pages of The Science of Liberty for free. I can guarantee you will come away with a new understanding of the core driving problem we must all face together in America, as it is America's only solution. I encourage you to dial into YouTube and type in EANC.TV and hit enter, where you can watch every episode of the Daily Lie of Omission. While there, I would also ask you to click on subscribe in the lower part of the YouTube page so that every time the Daily Lie of Omission broadcasts, you'll receive an email and a URL so you can catch every new episode. Then tell your friends and ask them to tell their friends on Twitter, Facebook, email, et al., and tell them to register to vote and start calling their congressman and senator and start putting the bricks to all of them. Do they support liberty legislation? The answer must be yes, because anything else is a no. And if they say no, leave them and go find a candidate that will join with every American and make us all free. America has entered an age of revolution, and I suggest you deal with this reality before the realities of a revolution deal with you. Because left to fester and grow, the only thing I can guarantee you is you are not going to like it. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, William W. Fawell. Surf's up, America.